turns out? Yeah. We're on page Kuf Mem Tes. And we are dealing with the question. We finish explaining that Makif relates to everything that it encompasses equally. Which is why it's called Makif. However, on the other hand, we are pointing out that there are different Makifim, different levels of Makifim, different types of Makifim. And we pointed out there is Makif, the Atzilus, the Kesed, the Atzilus, Kesed, the Bria, Kesed, the Itzira, Kesed, the Asiyo, because there's a great length, and we're still struggling with the Asiya element, the Makif, the Kesed of Asiya. So to jump across, just to point out that what we are dealing with is there are different Madekis and Makifim. And the question is, how is that jive with what we said, like that Makif is equal everywhere, it encompasses everything equally. And in order to explain, the Rebbe begins to point out that the Makif, that Makif, despite the fact that it is a Makif, but a Loshen in my mind is Yeshle al kol ponim shaychus im hapnimi. I don't know if you have a feel for the word al kol ponim. Al kol ponim means however it is, and however distant and super it is, it nonetheless has a shaychus with the pnimi. And in order to explain this further, we pointed out that the pnimi actually is rooted in the makif, and so forth. That even though the pnimi cannot grasp and understand the makif nonetheless is toifus in the pnimi. The makif does relate, does appreciate what the pnimi is. Except that this appreciation is what's called behelim, because it's a makif, it's a high madriga. So, having entered this I'd say mysterious arena, it became clear that we have to step back a moment and try to delve in a little bit, understand what is makif, where does it come from, what does it stand for, what does it represent. And along with that, we will try to get a sense of what it means that the pnimi is sourced in the makif. The first principle that the Rambam says, Yisoid ha-Yisoidet Amud ha-Chochmas. The first principle to recognize, in order to be able to relate and to identify anything in Avodah or in the Chochmah. One, we have to recognize that as a first being. What is so significant about this first being, and why is it such an imperative to recognize it. This recognition that the Rambam speaks about is not merely an avoider element. Just as you have to say Shema Yisrael, you have to know that there is a first being. This clearly is not what the Rambam is speaking about. Because the Rambam said this is the basis of chochmah. Chochmah is not a principle in Avodas Hashem. Avodas Hashem is Torah mitzvahs. So this is not talking about the Avodah Hashem. It's not talking about the principle of Shema Yisrael. Shema Yisrael is a mitzvah in the Torah that you have to say Shema Yisrael every day, and you have to recognize the name from Hashem Echad. The principle in this whole statement and ultimately the makif element is an imperative. Everybody knows what imperative means? It's an imperative. It's a primary
obligation,
a primary requirement. In order to recognize any existence, existence per se, please understand, you think about it, existence per se in the sechel does not make any sense. What's this about? What's it doing here? Existence makes sense, Amud HaChochmes, makes sense to the sechel only if there is something that brought it into existence. And if that is an imperative principle in an existence, that everything that exists has to have been brought into existence, it follows, please understand, this is a little bit more subtle. It follows that when we recognize something as an existence, the definition of that existence is that it is being presented to us. There's no such thing as knowing something out of the blue. It exists just because it exists. Is not acceptable to the sechel. Sechel, I cannot relate to that. Knowledge in a vacuum is not possible. Thus, anything that we can identify in our seichel, it comes along with the provider of that thing. What does it stand for, and what did the provider want us to know? In other words, along with knowing anything, we know primary to that, we know the provider who makes it be. Not only makes it be, but alerts us to it. Primarily, he is interested that we know it. This is the principle of knowledge. And the reason for that is, I want to kind of go back because I want to talk about the makif. It is imperative for us to contemplate and understand the following very simple and obvious principle, but we are always bound to ignore it and to miss it. Disconnected. Why did disconnected?
It's always a struggle to stay connected.
Huh?
It's always a struggle to stay connected. You gotta
I don't know what you
fight the Yitzhahara.
Welcome to IDT Connect. Please enter your conference ID.
I'm sitting where Shmuley sits. I have to be like.
Welcome to the.
Beautiful.
Thank you. You are now entering the conference room. To exit the conference room, press **. For help, press *9.
Good help. Good day, man.
Participant number 1.
Okay. Everything that comes into being, its existence is based on the fact that there is something existing prior to its existence. And it represents in its existence that prior existence. This prior existence is what's called Behelam. This is not an existence that we came to know. Because came to know means that it is not primary. There has to be something primary. And everything that exists is representative of that primary existence. This is what enables it to be. Just to illustrate the point, it's a sensitive thing, but it's important. If, let's say, the world, as we said, originally was created, was dark. And then God said, let it be light. And there was light. Let us for a moment pursue the thought that the world is dark. And then we walk around the world and we encounter various things. How will we relate to these things that we encounter by touch in darkness relative to the things that we encounter by sight? When we encounter something in sight, because it's by here it's light, and light means that we are privy, we are exposed to an entire reality. So when we encounter something, that something that we encounter immediately falls into place. This is part of that reality. If there was no light, if we would not have the overall reality that we can correlate everything that we encounter, that encounter would not make any, would not find place in my mind. The minute we walk away from it, it doesn't exist. It would not have a real presence, that we would remember that we encountered something and it is there even after I walk away from it. Because there's no basis for it. In order that it should be as a real thing, and it would be with us even after that we walked away from it, it is only due to the fact that we related to a broader existence that exists all the time. And this is part of that existence. This is the source of Makif. This Makif, in other words, provides justification, and provides a basis for anything that can be. This Makif renders even an accidental occurrence as a reality, because this reality occurred within the reality, the broader reality of the Makif. Just as we walk in the dark, we walk and you hit a tree. Oh yeah, sure, it makes sense. The tree is part of the broader existence which we observed already. Because when the Rebbe brought light, by this light revealed to us an endless presence. This endless presence provided for anything else to be. So this light, by did not merely make it possible for us to see the tree in front of us. It gave us a sense of the reality, they were presented to the world thereby. As a result of that, we can have all kinds of everything that the world can represent, can bring out, and therefore everything that we encounter in the world has this reality of the overall presence, of the broader, the infinite presence. In other words, Makif is representative of a presence that is primary, and because this is Ein Sof, because it is limitless presence, it is self-justifying. An entity that is limited, you have to ask the question, where does it come from? But Makif does not beg the question where it comes from, because Makif represents the motivation, the primary truth. In other words, if we encounter something on the Makif level, we immediately have a basis for its existence. We do not need to find a justification what will maintain it in existence. It is as true as the Makif that encompasses it. Like we said, because of the fact that we can see the whole world, when you encounter a tree, we don't ask a question, what's holding the tree up in existence? It's part of the existence of the whole world. this makif, he said, on the one hand, we only have a makif, we only have the greater reality. But this greater reality justifies anything else that will be placed therein, that will be identified therein. And the justification is such that it provides a basis, it provides it gives, like I said, let me step back a moment. If we encounter, once we have light and we see the entire world, when we encounter a tree, we know the tree is just as real as the entire reality of the world. It is not precarious because we just now discovered it. Because we discovered that's part of the whole world. This is what we mean by saying it's true that the koiches are not teifes in the makif because it is a superior thing. But then the makif is what provides the reality of everything. There's a certain aspect of the reality of the makif that follows through in everything else. Elapnimi. Now, coming back and trying to show in the Maimer what we're talking about. This makif is what makes sense, makes everything else exist in existence to make sense. To make sense, it is because everything then represents this bigger reality, this makif. Yeah, on the smaller scale, we pointed out, and everybody understood it, was it from our own perspective. That a house on Earth makes sense. It finds a place. A house on Mars doesn't make sense. A house on Earth can become a home. Because Earth, by virtue of what it stands for and virtue of its makif element, is automatically a home for all its inhabitants. When you build a house and you make a home, you're just revealing what the earth is about. On a specific level. But the earth is a home for all its inhabitants. Mars does not possess that quality. In order for the reason the earth is a home and Mars is not, because the earth in its broader reality is a living place. The grass that covered the earth, this represents the life element on earth itself. We don't realize to what extent how profoundly effective that is. Just as we said before, encounter something, the reason we see, it makes sense when we encounter something is because we saw the whole world. It's part of that original vision. It fits right in there. This makif that supports the pnimi actually provides for the pnimi a sense of reality, a sense of of justification. What does it mean to be? Without the makif, the pnimi could not orient itself. What does it mean I'm here? With the makif, it knows what it means. I'm here as part of this whole reality. I'm alive as living as the whole reality of what I am. The whole reality is alive. This is the effect of the makif on the pnimi. Without the makif, the pnimi could not survive a second. The makif is what provides buttresses, so to speak, and it justifies the existence of the pnimi. And when it justifies existence, it doesn't justify distantly. It actually imbues itself into the pnimi and says, this is what the pnimi is about. Every pnimi, every tree represents the truth of the entire existence of the world. This is the meaning that the makif has al-koponim and achizo. The al-koponim has a means of being represented in the pnimi. This, the Rebbe points out, and the Rebbe brings us in order to be able to explain the further question we had. How can there be different makifim, different levels of makif? Makif da atzilus, makif da bria, makif da yitzira, makif da asiyah. So we focused in on the principle of makif da asiyah. The reason we focus on makif da asiyah is because masiyah we have an ample illustration in our own experience. We have something to grab onto and something to focus in and understand. What do we mean by makif of a world, of a certain quality? Because asiyah means, as I said, asiyah means deed. Deed is something which we can very readily identify, but we have to be careful, focusing in everything that we perceive. All our initial, projections ultimately end up in a final action. The final action is just a plain action. The spirit behind this action has occurred much higher, either in the rotzen and the oineg, in the sechel and the midas. Coming back to what we already discussed, the spirit in a home has been identified way above before we put the first brick to build the house. By the time we start building the house, we already have projection of what this is about and why we're building it. We are already living in the house. But it's behelim, it hasn't come to fruition. But in our mind, in this earth has a house. And this is why we undertake to build it. There, and then it goes through all the entire Seder Histalshalos, from Oinag and Rotzen. Only a rotzen is what provides the basic reality. This is like the first creation. And then it comes into practical identification, into consciousness into sechel, and also into midas, and from midas it comes into machshava, dibur, and mais. Machshava is where our home takes a shape. We explained many times that sechel is an neshama inyan. The process of thought that we have in the worldly intelligence is not called intelligence, it's actually called thought. It's a thought process. And that I brought in very briefly because we already discussed it, just an allusion. Okay. Coming back to the difficulty that we had and we have discussed it last times. Asiya, the final stage of a whole perception, starting from the perception, from the chochmah, from also the einigen chochmah and sechel and midas and so on, until it comes to an actual act. The actual act, let's say in a home, the home has been projected and so forth, and you already built the house. Now you're furnishing it. You're bringing the furnishing into the house. This is asiyus. This is when you make the house livable. When you bring the furnishing into the house, you are then building the home. This is not merely executing upon a previous decision. You are then building the home. And in order to do that, you have to have the spirit and the perception, what it means to build a home. And if you bring the furnishing into your house without having that perception, you will pile up the furnishing as a pile up furnishing in a storage house. In order to bring it in and set it up in a meaningful manner, in a home-oriented manner, this action has to have a machayas to it. Typically, if you were to hire movers to bring the thing in, they would just pile them up. They don't know what they're doing. To you, bringing the furnishing in the house is a complement to completing the home. Every piece of furniture reveals that this is a home in its own way. Now here's what I'd like to bring out. To contemplate and to project that the final setup of the home and not only the final setup, the project of the setup, but the actual doing it, bringing it into practical reality it requires a sense of makir, a sense of life. Even if you hired somebody and you told them exactly what to do. You told me exactly, put this over here, put this over here, put it here. It would not have, certainly not from his perspective, but even from your perspective, it would not be with the same finesse, with the same sense of reality as if you do it yourself and you have a sense of what a home is. If a robot or an animal were trained to bring the furnishing in place, they're putting everything in place. It would not be representative of a living process as it is when it is you yourself But every piece of furniture is another statement of life in this home. This is the meaning that asiyo, just the act of finally the final action, also has a keser. It is, you have the projection, so forth. It has a keser. It has a crown. It has a living life of its own. And if it is done without that life, then it would be a robotic act. With that life, with that sense, then everything, every action carries with it the highest that gave it birth to it. The word keser, as I mentioned, I just want to very briefly allude to what we already discussed. Keser means a crown. The principle of a crown is, like we said before, in the shoyresh. Crown is that you're relating to something which is above the head, above the mitzias itself. What's above? Above is that which is the spiritual reality itself. That makes it be. The spirit behind it. That's a crown. In a human being, we have all kinds of koiches. Sechel and midas and so forth. The crown of the sechel and midas is the rotzen and oinek. If a person knew exactly what to do, but he did not have a feel of rotzen and oinek in what he is doing, it would be an uncrowned and lifeless act.